Welcome to another edition of Know Your History. I'm Mr. Ben, and we're standing here in the middle of the New Trinity Episcopal Church Cemetery. Now, we've been here before, but we've never been here at nighttime. Usually when I give a cemetery tour, I get two questions. First question is there anybody famous buried in this cemetery? And I say, well, of course. General Charles Garrison Harker, for example, is buried here, a Civil War hero who was killed during the Civil War. And the second question people will ask is, do you ever see any ghosts on your tour? Well, I've never conducted a tour at night. I have to say I've never seen any ghosts, but I've also never conducted a tour this close to Halloween before either. So we thought we'd come here and talk about General Harker. Now, I know I've talked about him before, but I want to let you in on a couple of mysteries, some interesting things about his life that seem somewhat spooky, or I should say, the end of his life. Now, as you know, if you've heard me talk about Harker before, he was killed at the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain on June 27, 1864. Now, Harker was, before he was killed, he had a premonition, or as the Victorians would say, a presentiment, foreboding, feeling that he was going to be killed in the next battle. Now, after the Battle of Resaca, during Sherman's Atlanta campaign, just prior to the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, General Harker, after the battle, he was wounded in the leg. A shell fragment had hit him in the leg and killed his horse. Now, it just caused a contusion on his leg, but it was painful. And after the battle, he wrote home and he said, it was quite a close call for me. He said, now, I'm paraphrasing here, he didn't doubt that they would win the big battle, that is to capture Atlanta. But he said, all of us can't hope to be here for the magnificent triumph of our army. Then the night before the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, he was gathering his papers together and he handed them to a staff officer. And he said, I shall not come out of this charge alive today. Now, this was about 3 in the morning, so he meant later that day. So he predicted his own death, for sure enough, during the battle, he was leading the charge and got to about 15 yards before the Confederate works, and he was shot, a bullet passing through his arm into his chest. His men carried him down off the mountain, and he died in a field hospital a few hours later, his last words being, "Have we taken the mountain?" Now, Harker's body was shipped home. His mentor and a congressman, Nathan T. Stratton, had asked if he could have the body of Charles Garrison Harker. So the body was embalmed because the railroads wouldn't transport a body unless it was embalmed, which they had during the Civil War. And he was shipped home to Mullica Hill, to the home of his brother John. And the funeral service was conducted from John's home, and it was conducted by the Reverend Hallam of the Episcopal Church at Mullica Hill. Now, some people think that General Harker is buried in Mullica Hill. After the service, most accounts say he was buried in the village of his birth here in Swedesboro at the New Trinity Episcopal Church Cemetery, where we're standing now next to his monument. Now, this monument was erected by the officers and men of his command in appreciation for Harker's leadership and heroism. We don't know exactly when this monument was put up. So we have the monument here, but interestingly enough, we don't have any record of Harker being buried here. The church doesn't have any record. Now, they do have a record of Harker's father, Joseph B. Harker. He's buried here, but no record of the general himself. That doesn't mean he's not buried here, of course, but some people seem to think he's buried at Mullica Hill, even though there's no record of him buried there either, and there's also no monument. So I think it's a safe bet that he is buried here. However, there's always an element of doubt. Now, my friend and former reenactor, the late Rich Mendoza, said, well, there's one way we could find out. Did you bring a shovel with you tonight? No, okay, well, I would never do that, believe me. I don't want to upset anybody, not without permission anyway. Well, that would be one way to find out. However, we won't do that tonight. We're certainly not going to do that. Now, the Victorians, who were kind of obsessed with the death, sometimes people would come, unscrupulous people, in the night like this, and they would dig up a corpse, because valuables would be buried sometimes, jewelry, pocket watches, and so forth. So the Victorians were wary of this, and they set up things called grave guns or cemetery guns, which were primed to go off by tripwires if someone happened to come along and try to dig up a body. Now, there are also unscrupulous people known as body snatchers or resurrectionists, and they would come and they would dig up a fresh cadaver and sell it to a doctor or some medical lab where they would conduct anatomical studies on a fresh body. Now, another thing the Victorians would do, they would put what they called a torpedo gun. Now, not a torpedo as we know today. It's not something self-propelled. What it actually was a sawed-off shotgun inside the casket called a casket torpedo, but really it was just a sawed-off shotgun pointing up and primed to go off as soon as someone opened the lid of the casket. Now, I doubt if anything like that is here after 156 years in Harker's case, but I wouldn't want to find out either. So, we have been here for a little while, and yet I see no ghosts. So, well, I think we better conclude at this point, and I'm hoping that you'll tune in for the next edition of Know Your History. Meanwhile, hold on. Did you see that? Oh my gosh.